Coming up on New Day at Arirang, another huge jump in the number of new COVID-19 infections in South Korea as Omicron runs rampant. Officials estimating around 160,000 cases on Wednesday, a jump of more than 60,000 in a day. Experts forecast cases will peak in late February or early March. President Biden announces U.S. sanctions on Russia and states Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has begun. He slams Russia's actions, calling them a flagrant violation of international law. The sanctions target Russian banks, Russia's sovereign debt, and a number of the country's extremely wealthy oligarchs. Plus, overseas voting begins Wednesday for South Korea's March 9th presidential election. Registered voters can cast their ballots at Korean embassies and consulates around the world through next Monday.
Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m., February 23rd here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Mo-kyeon.
And I'm Mark Brim. Over the next hour, we will be taking a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world. We start, though, with the COVID-19 situation in this country. South Korea is forecast to see a whopping 160,000 COVID-19 cases on this Wednesday, following a huge uptick in the number of tests conducted a couple of days ago.
But authorities remain calm, saying South Korea, like other countries, is entering the final phase of the pandemic. For more on this, our reporter Choi Min-jung is here in the studio with us. Good morning, Min-jung.
Good morning.
So a huge jump we're expecting today.
Right, Mo-kyeon, the daily tally has already surpassed the all-time high. From midnight to 9 p.m. Tuesday, South Korea saw more than 158,000 cases. So we're expecting the new cases surpass the 160,000 mark for the very first time. The figure increased significantly from the day before by more than 60,000 cases. It's also close to double what was seen a week ago. The explosive number comes as there were more tests carried out on Monday. Over the weekend, there were fewer than 300,000 tests each day, but twice as many were done on Monday with 580,000 tests. Around 50,000 cases were confirmed in Gyeonggi-do province, and the capital Seoul saw its daily tally go above the 40,000 mark for the first time.
Okay, those are very large numbers, of course, but authorities still, as Mo-kyeon mentioned, remain cautiously optimistic, saying that South Korea may at this point be moving from the pandemic phase to it just being endemic.
Right. Health authorities are saying the country is now seeing an exit from COVID-19. Let's take a listen to what they said.
For now, we've gone to an initial stage of switching to an endemic management system while keeping a check on Omicron's degree of risk. If we keep the low fatality rate and manage to curb the spread, eventually Omicron will also be dealt with like other infectious diseases.
Authorities pointed out that the number of infections increased almost 15-fold in just a month after Omicron became the dominant variant. But they stressed that the number of severely ill patients and deaths increased just 1.6-fold and 1.2-fold respectively. So they're saying the current situation is different to what we experienced in 2020 and 2021, emphasizing the lower fatality rate despite the relatively faster spread. Officials added that they will plan on making changes to social distancing rules and vaccine pass mandates once the Omicron wave hits its peak.
But Min-jung, there are growing concerns as more and more children and teenagers are also contracting the virus.
That's right. Currently, 1 in 3 new infections are reported among those aged under 20. And authorities are especially concerned over the growing number of infections among young children. 9-year-olds and younger currently account for more than 15% of new cases, and cases have more than doubled over the past period of a week. It's particularly concerning because people in this age bracket are not yet eligible to receive vaccines. The government previously announced that an inoculation plan will be laid out for young children in February, but they said they are still under review. If the health condition of a confirmed child worsens, parents can call a nearby hospital for non-contact treatment or go to children's outpatient treatment centers to get checked. Besides monitoring body temperature, experts are saying parents should also watch out for signs like the child refusing to eat or if they urinate less. And if this is the case, they advise parents to take their child to the doctor.
And recently, South Korea's National Assembly approved an extra budget bill worth billions of dollars aimed at helping small businesses hit hardest by the pandemic. And we hear that applications to get some of those funds starts within the next hour.
Right, Mark. Small business hours hit by COVID-19 restrictions will be able to apply for more relief starting today at 9 a.m. Some 3.3 million businesses will get 3 million won each, which is around $2,500. And the money will start being rolled out today as well. Applications will be open for businesses that have a business registration number ending with an odd number, and those ending with an even number will be able to apply on Thursday. Those that are eligible are small businesses that have been affected by restrictions on business hours imposed from mid-December last year.
All right, Min-jung, thank you so much for your report. Talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As always, moving on to the big international news of the day. Following weeks of escalation over Ukraine, US President Joe Biden gave a televised statement Tuesday saying Russia is beginning an invasion of that country.
And as a result, Moscow is now subject to tough new sanctions imposed by the U.S. and other Western nations over its increasing aggression towards its southern neighbor. Kim Hyo-sun has the story. Referring to Russia's latest aggression against Ukraine, U.S. President Joe Biden announced Tuesday that the events now underway are, quote, the beginning of a Russian invasion. He then unveiled fresh sanctions on Moscow.
We're implementing full blocking sanctions on two large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russian sovereign debt.
In a nationally televised speech, Biden added Washington is moving more troops and equipment to bolster U.S. forces in Europe. But he made clear they would not be there to fight Russia. He also dangled the possibility of de-escalation through diplomacy, stressing Washington remains open to talking with Moscow and its partners to avoid an all-out war. In Europe, EU leaders unanimously agreed on a sanctions package against Russia over its recognition of Ukrainian separatist regions and the deployment of troops.
This package of sanctions that has been approved by unanimity by the member states will hurt Russia, and it will hurt a lot. And we are doing that in a strong coordination with our partners, US, UK, and Canada, with whom I've been in close contact during these hours.
The package includes sanctions targeting all of those involved in the, quote, illegal decision in Ukraine. Britain also announced sanctions with 5 Russian banks having their assets frozen. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said more actions could follow. Germany has also halted the Nord Stream 2 Baltic Sea gas pipeline project designed to double the flow of Russian gas into the country. The head of NATO also insisted Russia is planning to invade Ukraine.
Every indication is that Russia continues to plan for a full-scale attack on Ukraine. We see the ongoing military buildup.
Such international measures were ignited by Russian President Vladimir Putin's recognition of the territorial claims of the self-declared separatist republics in Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. While Putin's move could significantly escalate the risk of war with Ukraine, he says Russia does not plan to send troops into the region immediately. His remarks come after Russia's upper house voted to allow President Putin to deploy, quote, peacekeepers to the breakaway regions. Putin also stated that the Minsk agreement is no longer valid. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign minister met on Tuesday with the head of UNESCO, delivering Seoul's strong concerns over Japan's controversial push for UNESCO heritage status for mines that used Koreans for forced labor before and during World War II. As well as that meeting, Chung Eui-yong also discussed North Korea's nuclear issues with ministers from the Indo-Pacific region and Europe. Yoon Suk-yeol reports.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong delivered strong concerns to the UNESCO chief regarding Japan's recent push to get its Sado mines, where Koreans were forced to labor during wartime, listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. He met UNESCO Secretary General Audrey Azoulay on Tuesday in Paris. Chung called for cooperation from UNESCO so that Japan can first fulfill its promise to honor Korean victims at other places that have been designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, the UNESCO chief said she understands the Korean government's concerns and promised to continue efforts on that issue. In 2015, Japan's Meiji-era industrial sites, including Hashima Island, where Koreans were forcibly taken to work in coal mines, were designated as World Heritage Sites following Japan's promise to acknowledge its use of forced labor and honor the victims. But these pledges have yet to be carried out. They also discussed bolstering cooperation between Korea and UNESCO, including Seoul's pledge to contribute some $5.5 million to the rebuilding of Muslim monuments in Iraq over the course of 3 years. The South Korean minister also asked for support to get the DMZ listed as a UNESCO heritage site together with North Korea. The meeting came on the sidelines of the Indo-Pacific Foreign Ministers meeting in Paris, hosted by the EU and France on Tuesday to discuss security, digital, and global issues. Also discussed were North Korea's nuclear issues and efforts to bring them back to talks. There, Chung expressed concerns that historical issues between neighboring countries make regional cooperation difficult, adding that he wished countries would learn from reconciliation in Europe. The comment could be interpreted as referring to thorny Seoul-Tokyo ties stemming from unresolved historical issues, including wartime forced labor and sexual enslavement. Chung separately met his counterparts from several countries, including Sweden and Bulgaria, to enhance cooperation with Seoul. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. The global economy is dealing with a number of potentially destabilizing uncertainties at the moment. The pandemic, of course, remains at the forefront, but there's also the crisis in Ukraine and various tensions swirling around, which are giving the markets jitters.
In South Korea, with the presidential election a matter of weeks away, the candidates have been making pledges about how they could lead the country out of this period of high inflation, virus restrictions, and skyrocketing housing prices. Unfortunately, there's no easy fix, as past presidents quickly came to realize. For more, we connect to Oh Jun-seok, professor at Sungmyeong Women's University School of Business. Good morning, Professor Oh.
Morning.
So many experts are now saying the Omicron surge could reach its peak in South Korea by early March or so. Do you anticipate the economy would flourish once we're over the worst of the pandemic?
Hope to see the bright side, but I think the economic outlook does not look that positive in 2022. In 2021, Korean economy grew 4%, a rebound from 0.9% in 2020. This year, Korean government has set its target at 4% of growth. It is expected, however, that the Korean economy would hardly gain momentum because there are two major risks: a market risk from China and cost-push risk from Russia. Slowing China will cast a dark cloud over Korean economy. China accounts for 15% of world trade and takes a quarter of Korean export. Last December and this January, Korea recorded trade deficit consecutive months for the first time in 14 years. China is not only the biggest consumer market for Korean products, but it is also the key supplier of Korean producers. Another risk comes from Russia. The trade deficit has already been the result of an unstable energy market. The situation could remain unfavorable, particularly due to ongoing conflicts in Ukraine. And tension between Russia and the U.S. over Ukraine have driven already higher oil prices for Korean economy. These risks will increase overall production costs, losing margin and competitiveness in international trade.
Okay, we'll touch upon Ukraine in just a moment, but inflation remains the thorn in the side of a great many countries. The US in January seeing inflation hit a 40-year high. Isn't much better here in South Korea. Is there much that policymakers can do in their respective nations to counter inflation, or is this just something that has to be ridden out?
Once there was an earthquake, there will be unavoidable afterquake. Inflation is not the cause of printing money, but the result of spreading money, which is done already, unavoidable now. I'd like to carve out politicians from policymakers. At this moment, what the politicians can do is to stop sugar-coated lip service of populism anymore. If not, financial volatility will be widened into stock market and further into foreign exchange market. Promising money injection driven by political calculation would turn out only to be another earthquake and afterquake. The thing for policymakers to do now is decreasing money supply, so-called quantitative tightening. At the same time, the market contingency considered, a step up of interest rate in a series is needed to curb down the inflationary pressure in the market. And that is because the production slump caused by supply chain bottleneck is leading to a rapid increase in prices. The Bank of Korea is projected to revise upward its inflation target to 2.8% for 2022 from an earlier 2%. What it needs most is not big hug nor big hand, but big head.
Now, Professor, South Korea's Financial Services Commission has closely watched meeting upcoming later this week. So with many economic issues at the forefront of many people's minds, what do you expect them to announce?
Amid the recent volatility in equity market, the Financial Services Committee has raised market monitoring level up to caution. The authority will continue to closely monitor financial market condition at home and abroad to check potential risk factors. Real estate market should be monitored. It is expected that the meeting will discuss the potential impact of market volatility on the household and corporate debt situations. In this end, the urgency of stabilizing housing prices, housing loan will be minimized. And then another thing we have to add is financial market volatility seems to be unavoidable for some time due to a number of factors, spread of the Omicron variant, slowdown in China's economic growth, and the Russian-Ukraine conflicts. As Russia wants strategically to make an alliance with China, they might have counted the days waiting for the closing of Beijing Winter Olympics. And the Beijing hosted Olympic is over. It is highly necessary to monitor markets to prevent market anxiety from spreading excessively when export and growth indicators are standing sound and strong.
Okay, and finally, senior finance officials from the G20 nations met last week, and they warned that the crisis in Ukraine threatens the post-pandemic recovery, especially if it escalates into a full-fledged war. How do you think international markets and national economies would react if there is a full-scale war between Russia and Ukraine, potentially dragging in other countries?
It will be a perfect storm, definitely, in the middle of economic recovery from the pandemic. The Ukraine crisis is not a distant problem. Korean geopolitical risks from powerful neighbors resembles those of Ukraine. The crisis will surely push up international oil and grain prices. If Russia shut down all the pipelines carrying gas to Europe, gasoline prices in Korea already surged to 2,000 won per liter from 1,800 won. Red alarm of stagflation is on. Russia is the world's top wheat exporter, while Ukraine is one of the 4 major corn exporters globally. Ukraine, long known as the breadbasket of Europe, actually sends more than 40% of its wheat and corn export to the Middle East and African countries. Korea's grain import price hit a record high in December last year. There might be concern over potential agflation, combination of agriculture with inflation, global food price rise. If the crisis the crisis spill over into a war, the natural gas export to Europe would be cut if the U.S. slaps sanctions on Russia. Vicious cycle moves to financial instability, amplifying foreign exchange volatility, capital flies from the major financial market, finding for the safe haven. All the instability could lead to a knock-on effect on other markets. This crisis might turn into another global economic crisis.
Right, let's hope the situation could get better. Professor, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And now to the election front. Overseas voting for South Korea's March 9th presidential election begins Wednesday, running for 6 days through February 28th. According to the National Election Commission, overseas South Korean voters in 115 countries who have registered in advance will be able to cast their ballots from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in their time zone. Ballots can be cast at around 180 diplomatic offices and 220 polling stations. Voting will not take place in Ukraine due to the geopolitical situation. Eligible voters should bring valid photo ID, and some 226,000 overseas voters have registered to vote. South Korea's presidential candidates were back on the campaign trail Tuesday, a day after holding their third televised debate. The ruling party's candidate, Lee Jae-myung, held rallies in his home province of Gyeonggi-do as well as Incheon. He pledged to boost the economy and promised more pandemic relief payments. Kim Do-yeon reports.
On Tuesday, a day after lawmakers passed an extra budget that'll pay around $2,500 in relief funds to small business owners, the candidate for the ruling Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, promised the public more.
It's not enough, right? As I've promised, as soon as I'm elected, I will either get a second extra budget passed or give emergency authorization for funds worth more than $40 billion to compensate those who have suffered without being properly compensated.
He was back on the road after around a day and a half set aside to prepare for Monday night's debate. And he began the day with rallies just to the west of the capital in the port city of Incheon. Here at a key gateway for the nation's imports and exports, Lee Jae-myung argued why he is a top pick for the South Korean economy, why he is the one who can ensure stable economic growth. He also touched upon the importance of security on the peninsula, saying his key rival's recent comments would only exacerbate tensions with the north.
Peace is very important to Incheon. Peace is the answer.
He ended the day with rallies in his home province of Gyeonggi-do, hitting the cities of Bucheon and Ansan. There he claimed that Gyeonggi-do has thrived under his leadership as governor in the past 4 years and said he is ready to take on the role of president. The places he visited on Tuesday play crucial roles in the election. The outcome of the election in the city of Incheon tends to reflect that of the nation overall, while many voters in Gyeonggi-do are thought to be undecided. On Wednesday, Lee Jae-myung will be traveling to Chungcheong province and the administrative city of Sejong. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Staying with our coverage on the upcoming election, the candidates of the main opposition, People Power Party, Yoon Suk-yeol, spent Tuesday traveling along the country's west coast. He vowed to become a president of unity for the people. Lee Kyung-in reports.
Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party on Tuesday held rallies in Chungcheong Namdo province, a toss-up in this election. In the region that doesn't have traditional political allegiances to any side, Yoon tried to establish a connection by presenting himself the son of Chungcheong. His father was born in the province. Yoon's first stop was Torme Sanctuary, the birthplace of Korean Catholicism. It was a symbolic choice that represented his core message throughout the day: national unity. Yoon repeatedly called on the need for unity, adding that balanced national growth is key to achieving that. And he appealed to the public in the cities of Tangjin, Seosan, and Hongseong by vowing to make the region a tourist and industrial hub.
We will develop the industry and economy of this region by completing Seosan Airport and the railway connecting the east and west of the central region as quickly as possible.
As part of his vision to boost regional development, Yoon Suk-yeol headed to the tourist city of Poryong, which has become internationally recognized for its mud festival. Due to COVID-19, the Mud Festival has been held online for the past 2 years, and the local economy has stagnated. Yoon Suk-yeol is promising to bring back the festival and revitalize the economy once again. As well as unifying the country through balanced growth, Yoon also vowed more integrated politics.
If I were to take the next administration, I would cooperate with sensible lawmakers from the Democratic Party and lead the country's development driven by integrated politics.
In fact, Yoon had repeatedly shown his respect to former presidents Kim Dae-jung and Do Moo-hyun, both of whom are from his rival Democratic Liberal bloc. He later moved to the liberal stronghold of Jeollabuk-do province and vowed to end regionalism in politics and become a president of unity. 이경은, Arirang News.
Staying with the efforts to win over voters ahead of the election, minor opposition candidate Sang-jung from the Justice Party campaigned on Tuesday in Daejeon and Chungcheong Namdo province, promising green and innovation in the region. The People's Party nominee Cheol-soo went to his hometown of Busan, where he promised to ensure balanced regional development. Kim Yeon-sung with this report.
Green City versus Tech City. Minor opposition party candidates Sang-jung and Cheol-soo moved forward with their campaign trails on Tuesday, promising two different futures for two different regions. Justice Party candidate Sang-jung went to Daejeon City and Chungcheong-namdo province and promised to turn these regions into a green energy hub.
I will upgrade Daejeon into a green innovation research complex and turn Daejeon into a research hub to overcome the climate crisis.
Shim also continued to appeal to workers for their votes. She visited Hyundai Steel and promised to improve pay, safety, and welfare for temporary workers who are often overlooked.
Almost every day, there are people who don't come home from work. They're trampled, fallen, and burned to death while working.
Meanwhile, presidential candidate Cheol-soo from the People's Party took his campaign to South Korea's second-largest city, Busan.
Born and raised in Busan, candidate An on Tuesday highlighted his ties to the city.
I am Busan through and through, and I have never once forgotten Busan, even when I was doing politics in Seoul.
He pledged to secure at least 5 cutting-edge technologies for Korean firms and foster companies so they can become as strong as Samsung. Then he said he will strive for balanced regional development.
I will give Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongsang-namdo province enough authority and financial rights so that they can secure the global or domestic firms they want.
Next, he will take his campaign trail to the port city of Ulsan and Gyeongsang-namdo province on Wednesday. Kim Yeon-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea's minor presidential candidates took part in a televised debate on Tuesday evening. 9 of the 10 minor candidates joined the 2-hour-long debate that was hosted by the National Election Commission. Kim Dong-yeon of the New Wave Party opted against joining. The election watchdog will host another televised debate for the 4 major candidates on Friday evening. Now, with exactly 2 weeks to go until the presidential election, the campaigns continue apace. The candidate from the ruling Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, is heading on Wednesday to Chungcheong province. He'll also stop in Sang-jung, the central administrative city planned by former presidents from his party. The main opposition People Power Party's candidate Yoon Suk-yeol visits his rival stronghold of the Jeollado provinces, with one of the stops being Mokpo, the hometown of former President Kim Dae-jung. Sang-jung of the minor Progressive Justice Party will be in Seoul, starting her day early so she can meet citizens on their morning commute. And Cheol-soo of the People's Party will be in the southeastern city of Ulsan, as well as Pohang in Gyeongsang-buk-do province, a traditionally conservative stronghold.
And now we cross over to our Oh Se-young for Global Insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It's time for Global Insight. Even after weeks of warning by Western governments that Russia was mobilizing for an invasion of Ukraine, the world still watched in disbelief as Vladimir Putin recognized the independence of two breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine and sent in what he called peacekeeping troops. Countries around the world have strongly criticized the move at the United Nations Security Council, saying that Moscow has breached international law. Beginning with the US, they have begun slapping stronger sanctions on the Kremlin. Russia, however, has slammed the US and the West for cramming weapons into Ukraine and called on Kyiv to drop its NATO bid. To discuss the latest developments, we connect with political geographer Jared Tall, who is a professor in the School of Public and International Affairs at Virginia Tech and also author of Critical Geopolitics, Bosnia Remade and Near Abroad. A very warm welcome to you, Professor. Thanks for joining us again.
Happy to chat with you. I wish we were talking about a happier subject than this one, but it's a crisis that we need to address.
These unfortunate circumstances do bring us together, but nevertheless, it's lovely to see you, Professor. And well, could you begin by telling us a little bit about the two regions at the centre of the current crisis?
Sure. I think it's important that people get a sense of the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, and they are two eastern Ukrainian regions that were at the center of the revolt against Kiev in 2014. There were reasons why they were alienated from the Maidan revolution. They have a strong regional identity. There were major economic concerns that people had there. So there were anti-Maidan demonstrations in these areas. But the really key thing that happened is that a series of really outside forces from Russia came in and sort of promoted this idea of a Russian spring, took over the municipalities because there was a power vacuum. Essentially, the Ukrainian president, that was his power base, the Ukrainian President Yanukovych, who had fled, that was his power base. And there was his party of regions controlled that area. When he fled, there was a power vacuum, and these groups moved into that area, and they were able to successfully ignite a war there. And as a consequence, once violence got going, then things polarized really quite quickly. And you have this very, very unfortunate division where essentially in these two oblasts, 1/3 of them is controlled by these Russian-backed separatists that are effectively proxies for Russia's foreign policy. And 2/3 are controlled by Kiev, by the Ukrainian government.
And Professor, you've done public opinion research in these regions very recently. What do people there actually think?
Well, it's a very good question, and actually my colleagues and I are going to be presenting the results of a major survey that we organized there in January, 4,000 respondents on both sides of the line. There are the divisions, as you might expect. The areas that are controlled by the Russian-backed separatists have aspirations to join Russia, although there are nuances which we will present tomorrow when we unveil this research. But I think the main thing that people need to grasp is that both sides are very alike in that in one sense, geopolitical tension and geopolitical divide has been imposed upon them. And so we ask this question, it doesn't matter what country I live in, all as I want is a good job and then a good pension. We ask people, do they agree with that question or not? And majorities on both sides of the line agree with that. So in one sense, what you have here is an economic really an economic crisis, an area that's been previously was an industrial powerhouse that has fallen on hard times, and then a war really cratered the economy. And as a consequence, there's a lot of people caught in the middle, and they did not ask for this war. They want peace, but they're caught up in this larger geopolitical game.
And well, Putin's recognition of these breakaway states, they seem to some to be quite reminiscent of Hitler's takeover of Sudetenland. And well, does all of this mean war, or that Ukraine is actually being invaded?
Well, yeah, I would stay away from Hitler analogies because I don't think they necessarily help in this particular case. It effectively, what you have at this particular moment is a transition in Russia's theory of how it is going to achieve its end. And that theory was through the Minsk process, whereby they would use these territories as levers within the polity of Ukraine to make sure that Ukraine did not have a geopolitical orientation towards the West, that it did not join NATO. So these were levers that were going to be used, and the Minsk process was part of that. The transition now is effectively with the recognition of these territories as independent states by the Russian state. They've abandoned that strategy. And that is very scary for two reasons. First of all, these particular territories claim territory larger than they actually control. Remember I said that they control 1/3 of Donetsk and Luhansk? Well, they claim it all. And so one of the things to look out for is whether the Kremlin is going to back them taking all of those oblasts. In other words, they're going to break out from the current line of control, and they're going to at least seize these two particular territories. That means war, and that is a very, very serious situation.
Well, in response to Russia recognizing these two separatist states, Biden ordered sanctions on these eastern regions of Ukraine after Putin's decree, and Germany has finally decided to halt operations surrounding Nord Stream 2. Do you think any of these measures are going to carry enough bite, though?
No, I don't. We saw the speech yesterday. It was a speech of a man who has been in power for over 2 decades. It's full of grievances, resentments, there's anger, and I think it was a dark speech, and it is one that I think augurs poorly for peace going forward. I think that Vladimir Putin is thinking about that he has a mission, which is to sort of rearrange the territory of Ukraine, because he sees that as a way to secure Russia, which is, of course, extremely debatable, but that's his particular vision. And there's a historical legacy here, that this is something that he feels that now is the time to strike. He's got escalation dominance. Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine is relatively isolated, and he's going to push through. And so when you're in that particular mode of thinking, you're not really open to persuasion with economic measures, because that's seen as that's not significant relative to your historic mission.
And well, Western countries fear that Putin's recognition of these two states marked just the beginning of his overall plan to invade Ukraine or to make territorial claims over the country. And well, in terms of that, what do you think will be the Russian president's next steps, or what kind of scenarios do you think the West and the rest of the global community should really prepare for?
Well, I think that the Biden administration has been doing a really excellent job in sort of pre-buttal, anticipating the particular scenarios that are going to be used. So the charge of genocide, for example, that Ukraine is initiating genocide against the people of the Donbass is one that we've heard before. It's that whole rhetoric of responsibility to protect has actually been a staple of interventions from Bosnia and Kosovo. And some have argued that effectively what President Putin is going to do is he's going to replay the Kosovo script that the West used. He's going to replay that in Ukraine. But of course, in Kosovo's case, there was a real massive attack and displacement of defenseless people. In the case of the Donbass, empirically, that's just not the case. The evidence is just not there. However, when you have control over the media, you have the ability to sort of create a particular script, create a scenario, create the kind of footage of women and children in order to inflame emotions amongst the audience. The key question, and this is a question I don't know the answer to, but the key question is, will the Russian people buy into this? Will they see it as a legitimate war? The Crimea was different. Crimea, there was an emotional attachment to Crimea. The Donbass, I'm not so sure that this is going to work. We'll just have to see. I mean, media is extremely powerful, and when you're sort of broadcasting that, you can certainly move a significant segment of the population. But there's also a danger here for the Putin administration. This may be a war that people just don't buy into.
Well, for now, it seems that Washington, the European Union and NATO seem to be trying to maybe downplay the situation, while the United Kingdom, some of their officials have actually called this an act of invasion. Why is it that some of these states seem to be trying to downplay the situation at the moment?
Well, okay, so you need to grasp that. So what has happened right now is that we are at the sort of first step of potentially dangerous escalatory ladder. The Russian forces have not gone across the line of control that was agreed at Minsk. So now it has changed in as much as Russia has recognized these as independent states. It signed a friendship treaty with these states, and therefore it said it's going to put its troops there. It's going to establish military bases there. The big question is, therefore, is it going to go, like I said, going to go beyond that line of control? So there was some dispute as to whether this is an invasion or not, because a lot of Western analysts knew that there were already troops of Russia in this particular area. And so in one sense, this is a sort of a shell game in which there's a certain formality which is disguised as a reality that's always been there. So this is the first step. We just have to see what happens. You could argue that this may not escalate, that there's a way in which we're just at a new situation, and if Russia decides to kind of pause it, then it need not necessarily go to the next ladder step. But all the signs are, unfortunately, as if it is going to go to the next step. And that's really what's very scary to a lot of people.
And do you think Vladimir Putin is willing to risk war or go to war, really, over this?
all the indications are that he is. Yes, I mean, you can make an argument that he is, a strategic mastermind. Some people, realists in the U.S., have made this argument. I don't buy it, but that he's a strategic mastermind, and therefore he is bluffing up until the point of actual potentially crossing over into so-called kinetic technical measures. In other words, bombing people and killing Ukrainians and seizing Ukrainian territory, more Ukrainian territory. I think that, however, that if this evidence from the speech yesterday indicates that this is someone who is really sort of set on war, and there was a punitiveness to the speech yesterday that I think took some analysts by surprise, and that doesn't bode well.
Well, I suppose we'll have to wait and see what happens. There, as you said, all the signs do seem to be pointing towards invasion. Hopefully there will be a diplomatic solution that's available. But, well, this is where we'll end the interview today. That was Jared Toole, Professor in the School of Public and International Affairs at Virginia Tech. Thank you again so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Judges from Colombia's Constitutional Court on Monday decriminalized abortion up to 24 weeks from conception, marking a major victory for abortion rights groups. The decision now puts Colombia alongside other Latin American countries that have recently liberalized abortion access, including Mexico and Ecuador. Prior to the latest ruling, abortion was only partially legalized in the country under a 2006 court decision which allowed it only in cases of rape, fetal deformity, and the health of the woman without any time limits. Rights groups say decriminalization will reduce deaths from clandestine procedures, save the underfunded health system money, end expensive prosecution, and guarantee women's bodily autonomy. Some 350 women were convicted or sanctioned for having abortions between the 2006 ruling and 2019. This includes at least 80 girls under 18 years of age. House prices in the United States rose 18.8% in 2021. According to statistics from S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index, that figure is the biggest increase in 34 years of data being compiled, and far higher than 2020's 10.4% gain. While all regions of the country saw price gains last year, increases were highest in the South and Southeast, each of which were up over 25%. Among individual cities, Phoenix, Tampa, and Miami reported the highest annual gains, with Phoenix leading the way for the 31st consecutive month, with prices 32.5% higher than the year before. Bullfighting in Mexico City may be a thing of the past, as legislators in the city assembly are seeking to revive a bill banning the activity. This comes as the Assembly's Animal Welfare Commission gave preliminary approval to a law banning public events at which animals are subject to mistreatment and cruelty that results in their death. However, the bill never made it to a vote before a full assembly. A number of vendors are against the passing of the bill, arguing the event creates about 3,000 jobs, while the Bullfighting Association claimed the real number is 10 times higher. While 4 states in Mexico have banned bullfighting since 2013, Mexico City is currently the largest venue for it, and a ban in the city would mark the biggest blow to the bullfighting community. The Museum of the Future in Dubai was officially declared open to the public on Tuesday, in a ceremony that was also attended by Dubai's ruler Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. The museum houses a permanent exhibition of future technologies in a 7-story egg-shaped pillar-free structure which stands at 77 meters tall. The stainless steel exterior is covered with quotes written in Arabic calligraphy, including the phrase, "The future belongs to those who can imagine it, design it, and execute it." The museum also contains 1,000-capacity multi-use hall, a 345-seat lecture theater, as well as numerous lab spaces. 이승재, Arirang News.
Good morning. Freezing winter air is still taking over across Korea with cold wave alerts remaining in place. Well, it feels like temperatures are below minus 13 degrees Celsius here in the capital today. But this morning could be the coldest day we'll see for a while. The weather is expected to settle around Friday with much warmer conditions forecast to move in. But cold air remains in place throughout the day today, and morning temperatures are 1 to 3 degrees lower than the same time yesterday. Sunny skies for most parts, while Jeju, Ulleungdo, and Tokdo will receive more snowfall through the afternoon. Meanwhile, eastern regions are under dry weather alerts, and daily highs will be similar to yesterday afternoon. Light precipitation on Saturday, but other than that, more dry and sunny days will dominate across much of Korea. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. We'll be back at 8 a.m. Korea time Thursday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm Kim Mo-kyun.
And I'm Mark Brim. Thank you as always for watching. Until next time, goodbye.